So, good morning, everybody. Very excited to be back here Lisa Senecal. For those of you who don't or haven't just heard my name way too many times by now, and I am joined, as I am every Wednesday morning, by Andra Watkins, who is the author of For a Time Such as This Substack newsletter. Incredibly important, focusing on Project 2025 and its deep connections to Christian nationalism, among many other things. Thank you, Andra, for being here this morning.
It's always awesome to be here. I'm always happy to see you.
I'm always happy to see you. We have challenging conversations because this is a challenging time for the country, but I always leave conversations with you and with the comments that come from the folks watching feeling better, even though we're identifying stuff that we all have to be really pushing back against. So thank you for that.
Well, it's good to be able to talk about things people need to hear.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that so many people show up to do that every week.
Yes.
So.
Yep. And you have listed in your Substack from yesterday, and some ways that people can be showing up for what is happening with a concentration camp in Florida. There are companies you can contact who are providing goods and services to the concentration camp.
Yes, one of my longest term subscribers in Florida sent that all in and put that all together. And so I ran it on her behalf on my Substack to try to get more reach for it. So even if you're not in Florida, you can go to that list of links and contact these businesses, tell them you don't like having a concentration camp in your state if you're in Florida, or in the state of Florida if you're not. I think it's only 6 companies. One of my commenters put up a little template you can use if you're sending an email, or that you can read if you make a phone call. So it's really quick and easy and fast way to reach out to these companies that are profiting off of suffering and lawlessness, and tell them that you oppose that.
Yeah, there are so many small but really impactful ways that people can be involved right now, even if you're not able to go to a rally, or you don't have funds to contribute to different organizations fighting back. There are so many different things that we can all be doing, and companies hearing from a flood of people about how angry they are that they are supporting a concentration camp. I don't know how difficult to find something that's worse that a company would be willing to make money off of. So yeah, please go and look at that newsletter from yesterday, and the list is there. It's very easy to do. Direct contact information to write these companies. So please go ahead and do that. Now, Andra, for our next uplifting topic of the morning, now that we got the difficult stuff out of the way, we're going to switch to talking about Christian nationalism and women, which is a really dark topic. We know that Epstein is in the news to the degree that Congress has adjourned because they don't want to have to talk about this anymore. The Republicans don't. Mike Johnson doesn't, and hopes that by the time they get back, this will have blown over. I don't see that happening. But
we can't let it happen.
We can't let it happen. It is too important. They are trying to find various ways to kind of pretend that the situation has been addressed. Their DOJ, someone from the DOJ is going to meet with Maxwell. They're sort of implying that that's going to have revelatory information that they'll be able to release. We know that's not going to happen, because if there is anyone that she names that could potentially be investigated or prosecuted, they're not going to publicly release that information, because that would be an idiotic thing to do if you are just beginning a criminal investigation. So we're not going to learn anything from that. It's just another smokescreen.
And I keep talking about this way publicly, and I encourage more Americans to do that. I mean, this is a group of men who like to rape little girls.
Yes.
That is literally what we are talking about with this.
Yeah, this isn't
And
abusing young women.
no,
This is child rape.
it's child rape. They were raping little girls. I published a picture of myself last week when I was 10. And some of these girls were 12, 13 years old when
Yeah,
they were raped by these men. So it's just really important that we frame it that way and not shy away from calling this what it was. It was raping little girls
right. There
and
there is
powerful
always,
men doing it.
yeah, and there, the push for parental consent, for a girl being able to make a decision about whether or not she is going to have a child, if she becomes pregnant. They don't believe that a 16-year-old is old enough to make that decision for herself, but we shouldn't be going after men who are raping children 4 years younger than
Right,
that, and
right,
pretending that there's some kind of, well, she kept coming back to Epstein's residence, so she couldn't have been abused there. That's not the way abuse works.
right, exactly. So, don't shy away from calling this what it was in every conversation you have with people. It
Yeah,
was raping little girls. It was powerful men raping little girls. And so frame it that way. Don't shy away from it.
yeah.
But
I'm curious to talk about sort of the connection with Christian nationalism and women, and Maxwell being the only person to date who has been prosecuted and convicted of, well, Epstein kind of was years before his next arrest, but we know that was all downplayed, minimized. He got a slap on the wrist. It was not treated as the crime, the many crimes that he had committed. But Maxwell's in prison. So how do Christian nationalists parse uh, going after a woman who was involved in this and wanting to go, la, 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 I don't need to hear anything else about the men who were involved?
well, we've talked before, but it's worth repeating that, Christian nationalists believe because of Genesis and because of the story of Adam and Eve, which they believe literally happened, that Eve sinned first. She ate the fruit first. She fell first. That was the original sin. And she tempted Adam to fall with her. So women are temptresses who have to be submissive to men and less than men because that's the way God ordained it in the wake of that original sin. So this notion that women are the ones who deserve to be punished, that at the root of every bad action that a man takes, it's a woman's fault. A woman has tempted him into that. I mean, I told somebody yesterday that one of my family members was molested when she was 5 years old by her stepfather. And when she went to her mother and said, he's touching me, I don't understand. Her mother actually said to her, well, if you weren't such a little slut, maybe he wouldn't act like that. She was 5 years old.
5 years old.
So, this notion of women being to blame for for what men do to them, for how men objectify them, for how men assault and rape and lust after and treat women terribly, comes from that Genesis story and St. Augustine's doctrine of original sin, and that has trickled down through every religion pretty much. I mean, it's even in Islam to some degree because they have a similar story in the Quran. So this is a problem that we have in our society with how we view women because of that story. And that's how they excuse it.
Yeah,
Women are always to blame for what men do because they're temptresses and men can't help it
yeah.
when they give in to these temptations. Men
I, I,
can't
s-
control themselves, so women must always control themselves and be controlled.
I still can't get my head around the their definition of masculinity, this hyper masculine, always in control, highly capable, and that somehow that fits in with a lack of capacity to even control your own behavior. But you can have dominance over everything else, but you can't control yourself. But women are too emotional and need men to be directing our lives in every way. We can't make decisions for ourselves. We need to adopt our husbands' decisions as our own, beliefs as our own. But we're also capable of completely corrupting men. And you can't square the circle that.
It was something when I was in Christian nationalism, and for those of you who don't know, I was indoctrinated in that starting in kindergarten, went all the way through 12th grade in a Christian nationalist school in South Carolina in the 70s and 80s. So I was heavily indoctrinated in that. And it was something I always struggled with, this notion that I was supposed to look up to men and respect men who were just weak and pathetic.
Right.
And I knew they were weak and pathetic. Even as a child, like this running around that they did, puffing their chests out and like, I'm the man, it was so weak and pathetic. But we were always taught that we had to defer to that. And
we're not saying all men are weak and pathetic.
No, but a lot of these men were. And in some way or
and they're
another.
taught to be.
Yeah, and they didn't know any different. And I obviously knew men in that church who were wonderful people. And had several men who were like second fathers to me, and not in a creepy way. They were genuinely wonderful men. So I'm not saying all men in that world were terrible, but a lot of them were just very weak and pathetic. And having to put women in their place and constantly tell women, don't talk, don't open your mouth, don't stand up in front of men and have an opinion, don't have an opinion. If you share your opinion, you're crazy, hysterical, delusional, not knowing your place and staying in it, and on and on. Like, I mean, a big thing that our coach did was in the school was he would teach the boys to laugh at us every time we opened our mouths and said anything. They would all just stand around and laugh. And so I was constantly being laughed at because I was very opinionated. And so, but that was how they would teach the boys to act like men. Mimic me. I'm laughing at these girls who are talking when they shouldn't be talking. And if we laugh at them, then they'll feel stupid and they'll shut up.
Right.
And they'll learn to know their place and stay in it.
Which does work incredibly well if you constantly see. Thank God.
So, that is part of that conditioning. And, I don't know, we're not going to change that world. America desperately needs, and you've got Evan writing for you now.
Yes.
Who does such a wonderful job. If y'all haven't read, his posts are really targeted toward young men, but he does such a wonderful job of talking about masculinity in a healthy way and helping model that in a way that we really don't see as much as we need to in America, and giving men something else to look to as what masculinity is. I mean, James Talarico's interview with Joe Rogan is also that. Yes. It's just a phenomenal piece of journalism, and he's such an incredible example.
He is.
To
He's
me,
amazing.
of what masculinity looks like, and what Christianity looks like. He does such a wonderful job.
Yeah, his definition of Christianity, like that, I can get totally on board with. Like this is just a life philosophy that makes sense because it's about taking care of one another.
And, right. He's just amazing. He does such a wonderful job. I hope y'all will have him on sometime, because he would
we definitely should.
Yeah, he's so wonderful. So that leads into we want to talk again about how Christian nationalism conditions women. We've talked about this here before, but we have a lot of new people. And every time I talk about this, I get more people going, huh, I never thought about it that way.
Yep.
So it needs a lot more talking about. So women in Christian nationalism are conditioned that they must submit to their husbands. Well, first of all, you really don't need to go to university. You don't need an education. You just need to get married as young as possible and start popping out babies immediately. You don't need birth control. That causes abortions. You just need to start having babies and submit to your husband and do everything he says. Let him control everything and stay home and rear your children. And that's all you need in life. That is God's
that
plan.
will fulfill you.
That will fulfill you.
And if it doesn't, something's wrong.
It's a faith issue with you if you're not fulfilled. You have a bad attitude. You're not following God's plan. You need to get on your knees and confess all that and get your heart right with God and fix your attitude. So that's what women in Christian nationalism hear constantly. And a lot of these women do that. They do everything they're told to do. And so imagine over the past 50 years, look at all of the advances that women have made over the past 50 years. For a long time in my life, it was legal to get an abortion. Women started going to university. Women started going into the workforce and having careers and pursuing, careers like being doctors that required an extensive amount of post-secondary education, and being lawyers, which required going to law school. And, so they were delaying marriage and delaying childbirth in favor of education and career and being able to take care of themselves.
Right. Being able to do simple things like get a credit card.
Exactly.
Or get a bank loan without having a man sign his consent, which all these things
have happened in my lifetime.
Yeah, we're not talking about ancient history here. We're talking about the 70s.
Right. So, this has been a huge watershed moment for women, or, series of decades for women. And you think about these women in these churches listening to, you have to stay home, you have to have children, you have to submit to your husband, this is the small life that God meant for you to have as punishment for Eve eating the fruit first. And all women have to pay. And so these women have done that. And then social media comes along. And suddenly they see, wow, there are all these women that I grew up with who have educations and careers and are making all this money and have traveled all these places, and I've never been anywhere. And they're buying really nice things and they have all this stuff. And they don't have kids because they didn't want them and they thought it was okay to not have them. And wow, I'm really
they're
envious.
speaking their minds and people are listening to them.
Yeah.
They think they have brains and thoughts worth hearing.
Right. And that's not my life at all. And I really believe the advent of Facebook, this was like a nuclear bomb that went off in this world where suddenly you could see, wow, other people that I grew up with or used to know's life is very different from mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really jealous of them. I'm really envious of the fact that they're doing all these things that I've never gotten to do. I resent that. Every time you show up in my newsfeed, that's another poke at me of resentment and envy that I have, that my life is just not what your life is. They don't have the capacity because you're not given a whole lot of tools to do self-reflection in Christian nationalism. So they wouldn't know that that's what those feelings were.
Mm-hmm.
They just get angry and they lash out at other women. So that is what causes Christian nationalist women to push down other women, to try to vote for things like not being able to get an abortion because, a bunch of them have children they didn't want.
Right.
And so if they had to have children they didn't want, then by God, so will you, woman who doesn't want children. Yeah. They weren't able to take contraception because they were told it caused abortions. So you shouldn't be able to have it either, woman who wants to take contraception because you don't want to be pregnant. I had to marry somebody and stay with him, even though I hate his guts privately, but I can't say that. But I stay because, I'm told that's what I'm supposed to do. So you shouldn't be able to get a divorce because you don't want to be married anymore. I've been beaten in my marriage for years and I put up with it because that's God's plan. That's part of submitting to my husband.
Yep.
So you shouldn't be able to go off and get a divorce just because he's beating you. That's how these women think and how they justify to themselves punishing other women for their different choices. And so when it's really sad.
It
And when
is.
you put it that way, you can have empathy for them. I have empathy for that. I've talked some about how my mom, she grew up in Eastern Kentucky, had nothing growing up, had a horrible upbringing, worse than J.D. Vance's upbringing in the same area, and wanted to be a stewardess, a flight attendant when she grew up. And so I know it's hard. And that's another thing that they train. The mothers are supposed to make their daughters follow in their footsteps and be the same. And I, of course, was not. So I know it's hard to watch me visit country after country and travel all over the place and see the world and have a very different life than what she did, than probably what she dreamed of having. So I can have a lot of empathy for that. These are hard, big, messy emotions that are hard to carry. And, I don't know how we fix it, but that's what a lot of these white Christian nationalist women are doing when they're lashing out and trying to control other women and push other women down and keep other women from having things.
I see comments so often on, not necessarily on our conversations, but in other places, people saying, I don't understand how women can support Donald Trump or support these Christian, how do women support Mike Johnson and the things that he wants to do? And this is it.
Yeah, it is. It is. If I can't have something by God, neither will you. And that's it. That's what's driving these women. And they won't even admit that. They don't have enough tools to do that self-reflection and understand that that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and it happens in other outside Christian nationalism. I think there's also generational stuff that happens with women. When I came forward about a sexual assault and publicly talked about it, there were definitely women, some older, but it did cross generations of women who were like, this kind of stuff just happens, and I have had that happen, and I sucked it up and carried on and didn't make a big deal out of it. And so why can't you just do the same thing? Why do some women think that they should be afforded special treatment of not being assaulted or discriminated against or, treated vilely in workplaces? Because this is just all stuff that the rest of us have had to deal with, and what makes you so special? And that
really,
resentment.
And that's the same thing, really.
Yeah.
I put up with this without saying anything. Nobody felt sorry for me, so why should anybody care about you?
Yep.
And I put up with it and shut up.
Yeah, and there's so much pain and self-loathing involved in that to some degree believe that is acceptable treatment of you, or know that it's not. And for the very many reasons that women do not come forward when these things happen, because even in 2025, societies, look at the Jeffrey Epstein, looping back, society's not wild about this stuff being brought up still, and the vast majority of sexual assaults are still not reported, and of those, the majority of those are never prosecuted. So women have a lot of reinforcement for why it's not worth it. Like, you have to find a way to live within your smaller life and accept the things that happen to you, because we don't have the social structure, and certainly not within Christian nationalism, that supports women who say, I am a fully autonomous human being deserving of being treated with dignity and respect.
Mhm.
And yeah,
It's
that's,
up to us to do that.
yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to model that for people. Um, I did not know that had happened to you, and so I'm glad you were brave enough to share it
No,
and
thank you.
talk about it.
I did get an awful lot of support. So it was
Yeah.
not, it was majority, very, very positive, reactions and support, but, definitely, definitely people who felt very differently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course. Of course. So that leads into the other thing that we wanted to talk about, which was this Tennessee doctor
Oh,
who refused to treat a pregnant woman. And this is all related because, she was unwed, even though, for context, she's living with her partner. They're just not married. They don't want to be married, but she's pregnant. And so this doctor refused to treat her because Tennessee has passed a law that says, people don't have to do things for other people if it violates their religious beliefs or their consciences. And so this doctor believed that being an unwed mother was sinful and wrong, and so refused to treat this woman. I wrote a great deal last year about Project 2025 and this kind of thing that was embedded all the way throughout it, where they have taken the concept of religious freedom, religious liberty, your conscience rights, and we're going to turn that into something where they could make people live by Christian nationalist laws and rules and mores, even if they didn't pass laws to that effect. And so this is an example in Tennessee of what Project 2025 envisioned for all women nationwide.
yeah. And this isn't an unintended consequence. This isn't
No.
like we passed this law and we were really trying to protect bakeries that didn't want to have to make cakes for same-sex weddings. And we never imagined that doctors would refuse to treat pregnant women based on, or,
No.
maybe some doctors don't want to perform abortions, or they don't want to prescribe certain birth control. Like, no, that was not, it's so much bigger and insidious and intentional
And they
than
knew
that.
that.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was baked in to Project 2025. Roger Severino, who is an Opus Dei extremist Catholic Christian nationalist, radicalized fanatic. God, I don't like him. and he wrote the Health and Human Services section of Project 2025. So that section is really meaty because a lot of his crazy is in there. And so this was built in throughout that section, these kinds of of goals. He was the person who was able to get conscience rights be defined by a court as, I don't have to prescribe something if I don't feel like it goes along with my religious beliefs. He sued California over putting in contraception as a requirement and got that removed because of conscience rights and religious liberty. So he's been at this for a long time, and he really believes, and other people who wrote Project 2025 really believe that the whole country needs to be living by Christian nationalists, mores, and standards, and where possible, laws. But if it's not possible to make a law, then they'll just give individual Christian nationalists the right to discriminate against people. And we call it discrimination, and more liberal journalists who don't want to talk about the Christian aspects of this just call it discrimination. But it's really forcing their religious beliefs on people and forcing people to acknowledge their religious beliefs and choices by
Yeah, this
refusing.
is
Yeah,
yeah, this is another reason why um, staying up to date and paying attention to what's happening in your state on the state level. These are, Tennessee's law will be replicated in a lot of other
exactly.
states. And this was a very good little testing ground and proving ground for them that they could make this work. And that, okay, all right, so this doctor's done this. We see that you can really push this beyond the limits of what people thought it was passed for, and you really can start forcing people, if they want medical care, to subscribe to. Even if you don't adopt the beliefs, they want to force people to adopt the behavior.
Exactly. So if she went and got married to her partner who she's been with for a while, would this doctor treat her? I doubt the doctor would still treat her.
She got
That
pregnant prior to.
because she got
Yeah.
pregnant prior, and that offends him too. So, but that's what they're trying to force to happen. And that was built in throughout Project 2025. Their goal, people talk about the cutting of the social safety nets. Their goal really was to have religious organizations be the new safety net and have everybody have to jump through all these Christian nationalist hoops and check off all these boxes in order to get help. That was built in throughout every section of Project 2025, including USAID, which I believe they'll bring back in some kind of Christian nationalist missionary program fashion down the road in a
Yeah, and
smaller way.
I think we're going to see with the dramatic Medicaid cuts and work requirements that you will be able to bypass a work requirement, or you become more eligible to receive Medicaid benefits again if you will attend certain classes or volunteer for certain organizations in lieu of the work requirement, so that they can force people into engaging with these religious organizations that they otherwise are not going to become involved with. So if
And
you,
red states have been building that structure for a long time. If you don't live in a state like Texas or Florida, South Carolina, red states, you don't realize how much of this already exists. But it's already possible in Texas. They did a huge expose in The Guardian a couple of years ago that I covered, where they were doing sting operations to arrest men who were soliciting prostitutes, and the prostitutes were police officers. And they came to these men as they arrested them and said, you can go to jail, or you can avoid this charge on your record by attending this lust prevention program that was run by a Christian nationalist organization. They had to go for 8 weeks in the basement of a church. They had to pay hundreds of dollars out of their own pockets for it. They had to go in there and be screamed at for being lustful, horrible people for 8 weeks. They couldn't miss. If they missed sessions, they would end up in jail. So it was very much religious indoctrination
yep,
that they opted into in lieu of going to jail.
right, and
You
you
know,
you put that in the more acceptable wrap of being some type of restorative justice. Right.
exactly. It's lust prevention. We're helping these men with their lust problem. But it was all Christian nationalist religious indoctrination. And that exists, in shelters for the unhoused. It exists in food service programs that are provided by religious organizations. It exists for women who go to get help and support as single mothers. This already exists all over the country, and they really want to scale it up.
Well, on that happy note, um, um, I I appreciate so much you, Andra, and everybody who tunes in for these conversations. This is really, really important real-time stuff that we need to understand is happening, and have the language that Andra provides for us to be able to talk to other people about it. There are so many people who do have those questions, especially women, about how do women go along with this. You expect when elections come around that women are going to vote in what you expect is their own best interest, which is not to be living under a Christian nationalist regime. But there are reasons that women do this, and being able to talk about this and put it in the context that Andra does, it's so valuable. So thank you, Andra, as always, for joining us and helping pull back the curtain so we can understand what's happening better and go out and more effectively work against it.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I look forward to this every week.
Me too. I'm going to leave everyone with the words of the prophet John Michael Ozzy Osbourne, who passed away yesterday. And so I will leave you with crazy, but that's how it goes. Millions of people living as foes. Maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate. So thank you, everybody, for being here with us. It's not too late. We can go out and we can do the work. We can make this a better country. We can make it a better world. It's within our power. So do what you can between now and next Wednesday, and look forward to checking in with all of you and with Andra. And we will see you then.
Have a good week, everybody.
Bye-bye.